Extreme preemies all have the shared, very distinctive looks. So much so that I made a mistake once during our 4 month NICU stay. One morning, when I arrived at the NICU, the team had relocated my child's incubator to another corner of the room, and I didn't know that. I went to the spot I had left the night before, looked at the baby, thinking, oh, he looks a little younger today. And I even took a photo to send to my husband. A minute or two later, I realized that I was looking at the wrong baby. Preemies are, of course, smaller, depending on how early they came out. But they look a little different from the usual baby image we all have in our heads for two main reasons. First, they enter the world underdeveloped while they're supposed to be still in the womb. Second, they're going through intense medical treatments that can physically impact how they look. But to us preemie parents, the preemie look is the most adorable thing in the world, one that not everyone gets to experience so up close and personal. Hi, this is Never Too Early. Today we'll talk about what preemies look like. Before we check out how preemies look, we need to understand what exactly preemie babies are. Preemies make up about 10 to 11% of total birth globally and 8 to 9% in Germany. Medical professionals generally categorize prematurity into three groups based on gestational age, and they're very different from each other. Extremely preterm babies are born before 28 weeks. So they are the miracle babies who often weigh less than a kilogram. The earliest reported survival is the 21-week preemie from Iowa, USA. While it is still considered a medical miracle and is extremely rare, most hospitals still consider 21 weeks to be pre-viable. This is where my child belonged when he was born at 23 weeks at 600 grams. This category makes up about 5% of all premature birth. They're the smallest in numbers but require the most resources and care. Very to moderate preterm babies are born between 28 weeks to 34 weeks. Within this range, very preterm is 28 to 32 weeks, and moderate preterm is 32 to 34 weeks. They still need intensive care, but their odds have improved significantly by this stage. This category makes up about 20% of all premature birth. This is where my husband belonged when he was born 8 weeks early. Late preterm babies are born between 34 weeks and 36 weeks. They make up nearly 75% of all premature birth. Now let's look at the chance of survival. It's important to share the stats, but please remember these are population level numbers. When you're in the hospital, the stats feel different because the babies in the NICU are already under the care of experts, which makes the story completely different. At 23 to 24 weeks, survival rates vary by region but are often between 50 to 70% with modern care. It really broke my heart when I was searching for these numbers in those first days, but the reality at the hospital was that most babies left healthy. At 27 weeks, the rate jumped significantly to about 90%. So you can be a little more relaxed unless you are informed about specific critical matters. At 31 weeks, survival rate is above 95%, and it only goes up from there. I hope this gave you a quick overview of premature babies. At 23 weeks, a baby really doesn't look like a baby as we know it. It's essentially a fetus living outside the womb. First, no body fat. Babies only start building body fat around week 28, with the most significant gain after week 32. Before that, they look almost skeleton. I remember my son having no butt cheeks at all for the first few weeks. Second, translucent and purple reddish skin. With zero body fat, there's nothing hiding that's underneath. You're essentially looking at their blood and muscles directly. At birth, babies also start discarding extra red blood cells, creating a yellow waste called bilirubin. A preemie's liver can't flush it fast enough, so they turn yellow through that translucent skin. That's what the blue light therapy is for. It breaks down the bilirubin so their tiny livers can process it. Third, Lanugo hair. Preemies are often covered in soft, fine body hair that normally sheds before birth. Since my baby came so early, it hadn't shed yet. He had these big, adorable sideburns and so much hair on his back and shoulders. Another one is bulged eyes. His eyes were bulging and not fully open. At this stage, eyelids are typically thin and fused, and they gradually open over the following weeks. This is exactly how a 23-week fetus is supposed to look inside the womb. It was right on schedule, just outside instead of inside. Lastly, lungs. His lungs weren't developed enough to work on their own. Surfactant, the substance that keeps the air sacs inflated, doesn't become sufficient until around 30 to 30 weeks. At 23 weeks, he needed a ventilator immediately. Because of all of the above, the hair, the lack of fat, and the skin, etc., my son looked a bit like a tiny baby monkey. I called him Curious George for a couple of months until he grew out of the look. Preemies are an early version of all of us. We all look like that once. Most of us were still inside the womb then, while some of us were out in the world early. How wonderful is it to realize that? As preemie parents, we get to see that early form of human life with our own eyes. As long as the baby is under good care and developing, we can try to look at this experience with wonder. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one. This is Never Too Early.